They've traded insults and threats. Now the US president and North Korean leader say they'll meet. Can Donald Trump get Kim Jong-un to give up his nuclear ambitions? And what does Pyongyang want from the talks? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hashem Ahelbarra. They've taken the world by complete surprise. US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un have agreed to sit down together, and the historic meeting could take place within 2 months. They've spent much of the past year hurling insults at each other. Trump's called Kim Little Rocket Man. Kim said Trump was mentally deranged. So what will they talk about when they come face to face? There's only one topic being mentioned: nuclear weapons. It was an envoy from South Korea that made the announcement about the meeting, delivering Kim's invitation direct to Trump at the White House. Trump was quick to say yes on his Twitter account, but on what terms? The White House says there are no preconditions, but there have been mixed messages. Mike Hanna has more from Washington, D.C.
It appeared that the US had introduced new preconditions when the press secretary said that the meeting would not take place unless North Korea provided strong guarantees and took strong steps to indicate the authenticity of its position. However, subsequently, administration officials said that Ms. Sanders was not introducing new preconditions. They said she was indeed emphasizing the consequences should North Korea continue or resume nuclear or missile testing or interfere with the joint military exercises taking place between the US and South Korea. But this confusion underscores the developments that have occurred, with President Trump leaping headfirst into potential face-to-face negotiation. Many expressing concern that negotiations such as these begin from the bottom up, that the face-to-face meeting between leaders comes at the end of a process, not at the very beginning. In addition, some experts point out the North Koreans have had decades of negotiating deals with various states. The Trump administration, new to the game. They're going to be at a disadvantage in any negotiation with the North Koreans, should it take place, from the very beginning.
News of the proposed meeting has made headlines around the world, but in North Korea itself, you might not have heard anything about it. Rob McBride is in the South Korean capital, Seoul.
If you are in North Korea right now and you do not have access to an outside source of information, then you will not know about the historic summit. In all 6 pages of the Rodong Sinmun, this is the state-controlled main party newspaper, there's not one mention of it. The only related item is an article attacking the latest US sanctions, which it says are a further provocation, possibly leading to war. The problem in North Korea is a propaganda machine that turns out a daily diet of commentaries, all attacking the imperialist United States as the great warmonger. How do you now turn around and tell your people that your leader is about to sit down and have a friendly chat with the leader of your arch enemy? Even harder, it seems, will be explaining that in preparation for this historic summit, you have put on hold work on your intercontinental ballistic missile. This has been heralded as a great achievement of the socialist North Korea, the thing that will offer salvation from the very same imperialist Americans. It seems the North Koreans need time to work out this complicated narrative in order to be able to explain it to its people. Looking even further ahead comes the prospect, perhaps, of normalized relationship if this talks continue between North Korea and the United States, maybe even relations veering towards possibly the friendly or at least less hostile. Should that happen, North Korea, it seems, will have to perform some kind of propaganda contortionists act in order to explain it all. Luckily for the people in the propaganda department, that prospect does seem a long way off.
Let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Seoul, B.J.Kim, adjunct professor at Jankuk University of Foreign Studies. In Exeter, in the UK, Aidan Foster-Carter, honorary senior research fellow in sociology and modern Korea at Leeds University. And in Washington, D.C., Richard White, director at the Center for Political Military Analysis at the Hudson Institute. Welcome to you all. I would like to start by asking Mr. Kim this. What we know so far is that the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, met with the South Korean National Security Advisor and then extended through him the invitation for President Trump to meet. Do you think this is it, as simple as this, or there's more to this particular story?
There are reports inside Korea that there is a undisclosed message coming from Kim Jong-un to Trump, and there are wide speculations here, and there are different scenarios, but we don't have information here, and we cannot even confirm whether there was indeed a discreet message or not, but indeed that's what we are hearing. So I think your point is very valid. Just the invitation and acceptance of the invitation, I don't think it explains everything. There has to be a lot of information and exchange of information going on that might have happened behind the scenes. So I agree with your observation or speculation that there is much more exchange behind the scenes indeed.
Mr. Aidan Foster, dramatic development, isn't it? Because, from the chest beating, swashbuckling over the last few months, suddenly we're talking about diplomacy and what could be potentially a glimmer of hope. What do you think has prompted this dramatic shift in diplomacy?
Well, I'm one of those who think that it's possible that the severity of the sanctions now being imposed by the international community and bilaterally against North Korea maybe has helped bring it to the negotiating table. I would also give credit to President Moon Jae-in of South Korea, who is very much the person who has arranged all of this. But with that comes a caveat. Just in case any viewers have forgotten, we haven't heard any of this from the North Koreans yet, not even the Inter-Korean Summit, which I think is a much firmer thing. And we have the South Koreans' word for it, that the North Korean leader has agreed to step across the military demarcation line into the south and so on. And now, once again, it's the most bizarre breach of protocol. You have the South Koreans, a foreign government, they're a close ally of the US, on the White House lawn late at night with no Americans in sight announcing that this thing is happening. It's all a bit weird. I would go so far as to say I'm not sure that the Trump-Kim Jong-un meeting will ever happen. I don't know if my panelists agree. There's so many things to cross since then. Let's wait and see. But yes, we have our fingers crossed. Hope springs eternal.
Mr. White, how significant is this development? Do you think it is, as Mr. Aidan Foster was saying, because sanctions are paying off, or, as others say, just because Kim Jong-un is trying to showcase that he is genuine about peace?
There are other factors that come into play. At the moment, we can't tell which are the most important. So you mentioned sanctions, you mentioned the public diplomacy effort of the North Koreans. I would add, related to that is, in a way, if it just goes for a meeting, then it's a North Korean gain, because they've been for a long time trying to get a high-profile meeting with an American leader. And normally the U.S. has conditioned that on certain requirements related to curtailing their nuclear and missile program. So it would be in their interest for a meeting to occur in any case. There may have been a role, China and Russia may have played some role. I know they've been pressing North Korea to compromise in some issues. And it could also be the North Koreans have undergaged a very robust missile and nuclear test program over the past year and a half, and they probably gained a lot of data from that. And they don't really need to test either of these two systems in the near term. What they need to do is develop a warhead that can carry the nuclear explosive device on a missile. And for that, they can just take a few months, and if this gives them more time to work on it, and if no meeting takes place, or even if one does, they can just resume in a much better place.
I see a point.
So it's all to North Korea's advantage to agree to this, even though they haven't said anything. What the U.S. and South Korea and Japan and others need to think about is, what are they going to condition this meeting on? What could they hope to get? How much are they willing to sacrifice the potential gains?
We'll definitely talk about the regional implications. Mr. Kim, Moon Jae-in has been trying over the last few months to get closer, try to broker any sense of an agreement. Where does he stand now? Is he excited about the potential of a meeting between the US president and the North Korean leader?
I'm sure he's excited about it. He has repeatedly said his objective, intermediate objective or immediate objective was to build a bridge between Washington and Pyongyang in terms of having talks between the two leaders. So he has achieved that goal. So he has enough reason to be excited about it. In terms of big picture about where the current government of South Korea is heading, there has been a lot of questions whether there is a ultimate goal in sight or it has any ideas. I don't think we have had much information about that yet. But for now, at least, this is a clear victory for Moon Jae-in because he has reiterated many times in the past.
Mr. Foster-Carter, you go to a meeting with no preconditions, but at the same time, you absolutely have no idea about the outcome of the meeting. Do you see this as a political gamble by Trump?
I think, like I think every other commentator, it's an absolutely massive political gamble, and you correctly identify it with President Trump. I mean, from what we're getting of the genesis of this whole idea, what staff input was there from the State Department? Zero. Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State, wasn't even told. A few hours earlier, on a trip in Africa, he had said that we were far from talks with North Korea. He's had to row back now. Apparently not even any immediate staffers on hand in the White House. He just happened, the South Koreans, President Trump was supposed to meet the South Korean delegation, who were indeed briefing him on their visit to Pyongyang, the next day. But he heard they were in the building. He wandered in. They relayed Kim Jong-un's apparent message, and President Trump, off his own bat, said, sure. At a certain level, you admire the boldness. Of course, his great shtick is he's the deal maker. He can cut through all the red tape and all the stuff. But at the same time, diplomacy is, as someone has already said, this is not diplomacy, this is egoism. If you don't have, a concrete plan, preconditions, I mean, so they're going to have to get their skates on really fast, particularly if it is going to happen by the end of May, where they're not now so sure about that. But, a lot of preparation as to what exactly is going to come out of this, unless it's just, just optics.
Mr. Weiss, this North Korean issue has been described as the biggest challenge facing the US administration for decades. But then the State Department seems to be in limbo. Does this say more about the way Trump handles politics at the White House, or is it more about a huge problem within the administration itself about tackling strategic issues like overtures towards North Korea?
I would point out that the disconnection between the State Department, the Defense Department, the Intelligence Community, National Security Council is a reoccurring problem in U.S. foreign policy. My institution and others participated about 10 years ago trying to work on how to improve the interface between the White House and the other executive agencies, because there's always problems with coordination, with the departments trying to do their own thing, with imbalances in funding between the departments and so on. So what we're seeing now is not something particularly new. There is a different factor in that the President Trump's approach to diplomacy is a bit different from previous presidents. He appears very comfortable with these leadership meetings. He appears to be very much influenced by the people he talks to in foreign governments, and somewhat less interested in receiving detailed briefings from the State Department, Intelligence Community, and so on. So it may be somewhat exacerbated in the current administration, but this disconnects a problem. Now, hopefully, as Adrian said, well, hopefully we'll sort this out over the next month or so. So they'll come in with a clear set of priorities, talking points, something that's comfortable for the South Koreans and the Japanese, who may rightfully be concerned about not having enough access to those talks. But I think there's nothing irretrievable at the moment. So I think they can certainly make this up. But I wouldn't read. I mean, this kind of confusion is very common, unfortunately.
And we should give it some time.
Policy making.
Yes, I see, Mr. Kim. I mean, you said that the South Korean president and the general sentiment is one of excitement in South Korea. But when you look back at history, there's been this agreed framework of 1994, followed by the agreement of 2002, 2006. It all collapsed within months. I mean, why would this one, if it ever happens, could be a breakthrough? Because others say that North Koreans are just trying to use it as a tactic to win time.
Right. I guess the hope can be found in the way the current situation has been set up. I mean, many media organizations around the world have pointed out that this time what's happening is very much top down. The top leaders, of course, Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang and Donald Trump in Washington, they're making the moves. In the past, what has been happening is all these working level officials ironed out all the differences, and they went up the ladder, and then final stage of each time period of getting to the final point was talking about summit meetings and the highest level get together and so on. And this time the top leaders are moving, and then the working level officials are busy to catch up this time. So looks like there is that critical difference this time. So that we can pin our hope in the fact that this style of interaction this time is different, and therefore possibly there could be a different result. But then again, as you reminded us, the long history of frustration, continuous disappointment is always in the back of our minds, all of us involved here in Seoul and Washington, everywhere.
It's baffling in a way or another, Mr. Aidan Foster, because now if this meeting is ever to happen, it will definitely, I think, be about denuclearization of North Korea. But this is a term that means absolutely everything and nothing, because, I mean, for the Americans, it could be North Korea should abandon its arsenal. But North Koreans are saying at the same time the Americans should do the same thing. I mean, how can they narrow their differences about this particular issue?
With great difficulty. I mean, to me, the big question about this whole summit, when it actually happens, what the agenda will look like, it could be summed up in two words: who moves? The stated positions of both governments over many years don't seem to give very much hope for middle ground. Excuse me a second. Full of winter cold here in England, I do apologize. So who moves? And it's very important. Denuclearization, there's a misunderstanding here. North Korea has not offered itself as the only subject of the sentence of denuclearization. They have agreed to discuss, again, if we believe the South Korean intermediaries, and I do, the denuclearization of the whole peninsula. That's quite a different thing. And we've been there before many times in the previous talks, which, as you said, collapse usually after a few years, not a few months. Let's be too pessimistic about this. But of course, there's a quid pro quo. If the North Koreans are ever going to give up their nuclear arsenal, the threat against them, which is real, although it's also defensive, it has to go down as well. And their conditions for that in the past have been pretty tough. The ending of the US-ROK alliance, the withdrawal of South Korean troops from the peninsula, and so on. There's no way South Korea is going to agree to that. So, unless we somehow find that there's been a real shift by, presumably, the North Korean side, presumably not the US and South Korean side, I don't see these talks actually getting anywhere. A photo op maybe, but beyond that, what can it be?
Mr. White, you've just heard to what Mr. Aidan Foster has been saying about the challenge of about the whole idea of denuclearization. In terms of style, the orthodoxy of the US foreign diplomacy with regards to North Korea has been based on the idea of incentives for the North Koreans to abandon their program. But then if that doesn't work, then they would go for sanctions. This time, we don't have any idea or clarity about what is the US approach when it comes to engaging the North Koreans.
Right. To be fair to the administration, they undertook a very comprehensive policy review when they came into office. It was the first one before the Iran review and so on. And they developed a wide range of possible options. From the one end, they considered just accepting a North Korean nuclear program so you'd have a mutual deterrent relationship such as we have with Russia, and they decided that was unacceptable like previous administrations. The other extreme, various first uses of military force, either an all-out invasion, or we've heard recently about this single strike to try and intimidate them. They reviewed possibly assassinating the North Korean leader and so on. So they went through the entire gamut and considered all the options and basically decided to focus on diplomacy, trying to work with the Chinese and other countries to induce a change in North Korean behavior, and sanctions to try and put pressure on the North Korean government, as well as impede its ability to build up import the material and technology it needs for a nuclear and missile program. And in addition, to build up the defenses of the United States, missile defenses, conventional defenses, and those of Japan and South Korea. So it's clear what they've been doing, which is actually pretty similar to what previous administrations have been doing.
Still,
it's a bit more intense.
You would find many people who would disagree with you about this, Mr. Mr. White. Let me go to Mr. Kim. Even Japan, which is one of the top allies of the US, was completely caught by surprise when it comes to this. It shows that they're really concerned about the American announcement.
Yeah, indeed. We noticed that's a big problem. But the thing is, in terms of how this immediately, directly involved players could have played out this game better, I don't think we have any other alternative here. There has been so much of activity between Seoul and Pyongyang communication altogether, and I don't think they just had a chance to notify Japan, or even Beijing, I know, is concerned as well. The thing is, everything progressed so fast. I mean, the agreement that we came up with so far is something that most of the observers had anticipated maybe taking place in a year or 2 or even 3 years. And then we got here, which is a very accelerated pace. And of course, it's the way I see it, it's natural to have not enough time to notify our neighbors. We do understand now Japan and China may actually insist upon going back to the old style of talks, the six-party talks, and we can see their interest in it, and definitely they don't want to be left out from here. And of course, Washington, Seoul, and perhaps even Pyongyang will have to take into account of their desires as well. So that will be important factor to keep in mind. But so far, we just didn't have time for that because of the fast pace.
Mr. White, should this be seen as a major victory for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un?
Well, so far, it's a temporary gain. I mean, what the U.S. has done by saying we'll meet with him is something we've in the past demanded certain preconditions for. The administration is starting to make clearer what those preconditions may be. And so it could be a gain, I don't know, major, not yet, but it's certainly something that could yield gains for North Korea or for everybody if we actually reach a deal.
Mr. Kim, this is going to be my last question. Should the meeting take place, where do you think it will happen?
I don't think it will be likely to take place in Washington because Kim Jong-un, he faced individual sanctions and so on and legal charges. So a very slight possibility for him to travel all the way to Washington. And then again, I cannot imagine Donald Trump flying all the way to Pyongyang. That would just not look good at all because of the overall situation. Seeing North Korea as the party that has provocated all along. So it will probably, in my own thinking, have to be about third place. And one of the good third place would be South Korea. So I think there is a considerable chance for this summit meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un taking place somewhere in South Korea. If not in the capital city, maybe one of the resort areas and so on. So South Korea is one place I would be watching for the summit meeting.
So B.J.Kim, Aidan Foster-Carter, Richard White, I enjoyed having the conversation with you. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hashem Ahelbarra, and the whole team here. Bye for now.